Thank you for joining me today on the Garbage Bag Girl podcast. This podcast is about all of us. It's about the things and the ways that make us feel pushed down and small. It is about how the smallest acts of kindness make the biggest impact each day. No one should feel like garbage, ever. Enjoy the show. Hi, this is Celeste, author of Garbage Bag Girl. Welcome to the Garbage Bag Girl podcast. We are continuing a series of answering questions that I get asked about the book. And two questions I get asked are, who is Shane in the book? And what the heck happened at the vampire house? So, welcome. This is Shane.
Hi, everybody.
So, I'd say let's start from the beginning. That sounds so long ago, but it kind of is so long ago.
Yeah, it was 35 years, right? I mean,
yeah.
We met in high school. I
Yep.
remember, well, you came on board and I was there in high school and you were the it girl. Everybody, all this drama and chaos about who's that girl, right? Who's that girl? And one day you came up to me and very much like you do now, you looked very intently and said, "Hi, I'm Celeste." And I thought, wow, of course you are. Like, why wouldn't your name be Celeste? So.
It's interesting you say that because now you know what I was going through at the time, and you always talk about me having like such an air of confidence, and
Yeah.
I really didn't have any at all.
Yeah, in fact,
So.
I learned about everything in this book much when everybody else did when the book was published. It was much later, so we went to high school, and then there was a gap, and we separated and married people and lived our lives parallel, but later found out they were very parallel through conversation, but reached out to through Facebook, and we kind of
So he likes to say we met online, but let me
we
just
did.
circle back. Really, so I was 15, you were 17.
17, that's correct.
We had mutual friends, and so I had dropped out of high school at that point.
But I didn't know that, and so we
Yeah.
would talk a lot, and we spent a lot of late nights chatting, and sometimes at my house, and and you would be there, and sometimes it was very late.
Your sweet mama.
And you would end up sleeping over or sleeping on the couch or what have you, and it was much later that I learned what was going on in your life. So
Somehow, I don't know how you knew, but you always found a random house that I shouldn't have been at and found the room I was in and had a blanket and made sure I was safe. And then next go around, there you'd be again, checking in on me. And I dropped out of high school and I was drinking almost a fifth of vodka every day.
Wow.
Folks. It was a really rough time. I'd spent time sleeping on the bleachers, bouncing around with friends. So that's when we became in contact. And yeah, I think we just had a close connection. We were friends in the heart right away.
Sure.
But then, like you said, we just moved forward with our lives, and 35 years later.
Yeah, and then social media come along, and I was able to keep in touch with you, or at least keep tabs and look out. I guess still maybe making sure you're okay,
Yeah.
One day I reached out and talked to you, and actually we were not friends anymore on Facebook, so I asked about why, and it was just a weird thing in your life. I don't know if you want to share. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because just so you know, my son and I decided to dress up for Halloween. I was Uma Thurman, he was John Wick. We thought they were killer costumes, and note, even if it's a Halloween picture and you point weapons at each other, you better disclose on Facebook this is not a real weapon, or there's no violence really happening here, because I got shut down.
Right.
And you reached out like, "Hey, did I do something to offend you?" And I said, "No, I just had to relaunch this friends thing on Facebook."
I didn't make the cut.
You didn't make the cut. Like, that's not how it works. We all know that's not how it works. So then a month later, you circled back and you were like, "Hey,
tell me everything. What's been going on?
Let's catch up." And
and you started to tell me all the wonderful things you've been doing in the past and everything that's gone on in the last 35 years. It was great, and it was really kind of then when I had a clue about the impact. You had sent me this really lengthy, warm, heartfelt message about that time and what it meant for you, and that some of those times when I brought you a blanket or you slept at my house, it was the only place you had to sleep.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I had no idea of those things. So there was always some buzz about things were different, and our friend Jennifer, and you were staying with her, and some things like that. But nobody really knew. You just had a very confident air about you that was awesome.
So good to know, because I was so broken. But I really didn't like people to know that I was this garbage bag girl, which, really leads into the conversation of the book. I moved with my stuff in a garbage bag every 6 months. But really, it's become more than that. It's become this message of kind of that mind trap, that mentality we get into when we're just not kind to ourselves, and we're not saying nice things to ourselves or about ourselves, and we become that nothing more than the stuff we put in the garbage bag.
Right.
So I'm going to read a little. You're in the epilogue, as you know. I got permission, just so everybody knows, before I published. But I went forever talking about that time. I went forever so ashamed of the life, and because I'd been told so many times what I was never going to accomplish, I was so sure, even as I had successes throughout my life, that I was still the garbage bag girl. And the book really gave me an opportunity to kind of be proud of her in a weird way.
Yeah, which is awesome. But let's back up. How did I get there? I think that's kind of funny too. So
how did you get
to the epilogue? So I said we ended up chatting quite a bit, almost hourly, I would say, for quite a while, long late nights. And finally I said, if I fly to Salt Lake, can I have lunch?
That's right. If I fly to Salt Lake from Florida, will you have lunch with me? I mean, how do you not?
Right.
That would be rude, first of all.
Anybody that knows Celeste knows she lives by the calendar, so I get 3 time slots that we could maybe have, which was very playful, by the way. And it was a Friday hour and a Saturday hour and a Sunday hour. And I said, what did I say?
That's right. And you said, well, how about we go to lunch Friday, because if that goes really well, then Saturday can be an option.
Yeah, maybe you'll give me all of them.
Saturday's an
Right.
option. Maybe Sunday can be an option.
Yeah.
And sure enough, every day we spent time together.
Yeah, and almost every day since.
It was great. And then that was it. Here we are.
Here we are.
A year later.
Right.
Nice job. A year later.
I made it.
We made it so far. So the beauty is where the place we get to come to.
Yeah.
That place of, so loving yourself means you have to love all the parts of yourself, even the parts you struggle with, even the parts that are hard and uncomfortable. And it took me writing this book. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the epilogue to lead into another part of our conversation. This isn't the end of my story, not even close. Before writing this book, I told myself and others I wasn't the same person I once was, as if I was ashamed of that child. But now, I know I am and will always be that little garbage bag girl. And today, I'm proud of her. She did something very difficult under the conditions she lived in. She survived. Just recently, someone from my teenage years reached out to me, a man named Shane, who would know me during those difficult times I lived with the Hats. Shane and I visited some of our old haunts, Butterfield Canyon, the trailer park in Magna where we met, and our alma mater, Cypress High School. I suppose in a way it was like a war veteran returning to the now peaceful battlefield where he had once lived in terror. But Shane was surprised when I told him I wanted to visit the old house where I lived with the Hats.
That's right. I remember thinking, I don't know if that's a good idea, because by now I had kind of picked up on some of the clues, and you had dropped a little hints and a few things. Book still wasn't out, so I hadn't read all the detail, but it was clear the things that had happened. You could extrapolate everything.
You're like, are you sure you want to do that?
It definitely didn't seem like the right move.
I said, I feel like it's the right thing to do. I feel like I need to make some closure.
Yeah.
And you graciously offered to come with me.
Very honored.
Which was awesome, because I was very scared. And I remember vividly driving down the road just to get to the street we turn onto, and just that.
Well, I can remember that moment too, because one minute we were laughing and joking and that lively spirit you have, and then the next you were not the same. You did very much went inner and very, very...
it was dark.
Yeah, you could tell. You could feel it. And so then we get out of the car and we're looking at the house and you're showing me which house. And you could just see almost as if you were reliving every moment.
Yeah, I hadn't been back there for a long time. And when I stared at it, there was just this overwhelming feeling of there was no peace. You know? It was just so much contempt for Kathy, and for the older brother, for my sister, for how I was treated. And it was like it had just been put in kind of this safe bubble for a long time, and all of a sudden it was brewing.
Yeah.
And I was physically having reactions, and you just calmly, kept touching my shoulder and my hand, and just like, I'm here, but not saying much.
Yeah, it was very weird. You could see all of that piling on, and then there was a moment where it was almost like push and rewind, and you could see all those layers lift. And it was very healing, very beautiful moment. So.
And then there was the guy.
Right. That guy was
so there's
crazy.
a guy on the phone the whole time who was incredibly nervous. Like,
right.
Who the heck is just these random people?
Yeah, and you could hear him like, they're taking pictures of the house.
He's telling somebody they're taking pictures of the house, yeah. And he kept looking over at us, and I'm like, oh man, we better go over there and reassure him we're not like those people. We're not going to pull out some weapons and get crazy or anything. So we get in the car
I'm thinking
and
we should
drive
either
over.
leave or pull out weapons. Because they were clearly concerned.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, he was very concerned, rightfully so. I mean, I would be too.
Right.
So we get in the car and we just pull over in front. I roll down the window and I say, hey, man, I just want to let you know that I used to live here 15 years ago, and I just wanted to come back. And no, I said, I lived here when I was 15.
And he got a little adversary. He's like, no one's lived
and
here
he
for
said,
20
I've
years.
lived here for 15
right.
years.
And no one's been there,
And he said, my son lives there now. And I was like, oh, that's why. That's why he's so nervous. So we watch him basically tell his son, everything's okay.
Yeah.
Everything's good. And he puts his phone down and he said, so how old were you? And I said, I was 15. And I said, yeah, that was a really hard time. And he said, you lived in the vampire house.
Right, yeah.
Which is why there's a chapter, or there's an epilogue about the vampire house, because it was a fitting moment where I look at you and we're both like, oh, of course that's what they
why
call
wouldn't
it.
it be?
Why wouldn't it be called the vampire house?
Yeah.
So he proceeds to tell us that the house wouldn't sell.
The house sat forever on the market, wouldn't sell, and finally his son ended up getting a great deal on it, probably a foreclosure at that point, and he ended up having to gut the entire
totally
place.
Guts it.
Saged it, and just had weird feelings until then, just couldn't hardly go in it.
And I said, so he's telling us all that, and I said, nothing good happened there, and it was just kind of a somber, solemn moment. But he kind of nodded and understood, and I said, so thanks for being cool with us being here. We just wanted to visit it one last time.
It probably gave them some closure too, like what, like some reality to what had happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Because imagine knowing that, but then you
think
know,
there's
like,
something
back
weird, but what is it? And
Yeah.
so now we were right. That's, I'm sure they called everyone. You wouldn't believe what happened.
You wouldn't believe we met the person who lived in the vampire house.
Right.
She didn't seem like a vampire.
Right.
I think not only is that about, sometimes we revisit those places, because then we decided, let's do something positive. So we went to the trailer park that you and your family lived in Magna, and which is, the trailer's gone, but we were able to drive through streets and kind of point to things and be like, oh, remember that? And we were there and all the things.
All the times.
And those were positive memories for me during a hard time. And there was a crazy contrast of that house and not too far, this other area, and the negative versus the positive vibe of helping hands.
Sure.
People that abuse, and then people that help. Like now, when I've reconnected with your mom right away, she said, well, you could have lived with us.
Right. If anybody knew.
Probably not,
right?
but yeah, it's the point of there were always those people that randomly would come step up for me that
That's right.
It was too hard to recognize that as a gift at the time because it was so hard.
Right.
And you, of course, have been so such a blessing. I always say thank you for coming back for me.
Yeah, and I always choke up a little because while I that's a very beautiful thing for you to say. Anybody that knows you knows I'm the one who's getting the blessing. You're the divine gift for sure. So.
Well, it's been fortunate to get to know your mom and tell her thank you for extending the gift of love when she didn't even know me. And the book for me has been that beautiful opportunity. I've had biological family, adopted family, people read it and reach out and say, we remember you and we remember that time being really hard. We're glad everything's okay. And I think it's important when you're even just writing the story of your life, even figuratively, right, that you take time to go back, no matter how hard things were, and you thank the people that stepped up and showed up for you. I think it's a good exercise for everybody to do in your own time. But the healing that comes with that is remarkable. I mean, if I get an email or anything, right, I'm always telling you, like, it's just a...
For sure. I mean, when you sent me that message on Facebook, doing just that, it really did kind of awaken that in me too. And so I've had to revisit some of my past moments and past relationships and try to mend those where they're mendable and do things and acknowledge people and the good they did. It's awesome. So.
And it's another reminder to also have grace for yourself when you're healing. That process takes a lot of time. It isn't just about you forgiving others, it's also about you forgiving yourself and walking that talk that you're sharing with others and becoming that person that you've always been meant to be, the very best version of yourself. And that's through healing and forgiveness. And I get, speaking of forgiveness and grace and things, I get asked a lot, like, what's it like to be with somebody who has that kind of a trauma past? And man, I just get showered with grace and showered with love and showered with forgiveness and patience and all of those things. And every once in a while something creeps up, right? And you'll have a moment or sometimes maybe it's a bad dream or a bad whatever it is. And those, to me, those are the times I get to love you harder. So, so it's just always great. Well, now you get to meet Shane. And thanks for being here. Thanks for coming back for me.
Thanks for sticking my side.
Thank you for joining me today on the Garbage Bag Girl podcast. Always remember, you matter. Please subscribe and share this podcast and visit CelesteEdmonds.com to join my mailing list.